Good morning and welcome to Our Chicago. I'm Judy Sue. The Illinois Attorney General is the state's chief legal officer responsible for protecting the public interest of the state and its people. This morning, we're speaking with the two major party candidates for the office in the November 8th election. The incumbent is Democrat Kwame Raoul. We'll be speaking with him in our second half today. First, we're talking with a Republican challenger, Tom DeVore. He is an attorney from Southern Illinois. Many voters may remember that he filed several lawsuits against Governor Pritzker's administration over COVID mitigations. DeVore says he is running to be, quote, be a check on unchecked power and corruption. Tom DeVore joining me now to talk more about his candidacy. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
As you know, this election for Attorney General comes at a critical moment legally across the country when so many major issues are facing states, including crime, election integrity, the overturn of Roe versus Wade, and LGBTQ rights, just to name a few. What would be your top priority if elected?
Well, I think crime right now is on everybody's mind for a variety of reasons. And in Illinois, it has to do with the Safety Act. You know, the Safety Act has now been, suits been filed against the governor and the attorney general by almost 58 states' attorneys because of the constitutionality. So while crime is certainly increasing across the state in major areas, it's going to even get worse on January 1st if the Safety Act's not repealed. So that's a big conversation a lot of people are talking about. And if I'm the Attorney General, I'll actually join those 58 states' attorneys, both Democrat and Republican, and work to get this thing deemed unconstitutional.
Well, let's follow up on the Safety Act. So it touches on a number of issues, including police certification, use of body cameras. But what is getting the most attention is the cashless bail. You know that supporters say it makes the system actually more fair. Why should someone who has more money, who can afford bail, get out? Those who are poor but could be equally innocent have to sit in jail awaiting trial. You have said that you believe the bill to be unconstitutional. Why?
Well, it's unconstitutional in its totality because it violates, among other things, the single issue rule of the Constitution. This bill touches on up to as many as 8 topics, and you can't do that under the Constitution. So that makes it in its totality unconstitutional for the manner of which it was passed. We can have individual conversations about specific components of that bill and whether they have merit or not, but the manner of which this was passed makes the whole thing unconstitutional. And as for the issue of the no cash bail, for those who want to say that it creates equity, actually, when you drill right down into it, it doesn't create equity at all.
Why not?
Well, because you're trying to say if someone doesn't have money, that in and of itself is causing people to sit in jail when otherwise they may not. Under this new law, the option is going to be for the judge to detain them until their trial without even giving them any opportunity to be able to bond out under any circumstances. So, you know, that's the extreme that this law does. If someone's sitting in jail only because they don't have money, there was an opportunity for them to post bond, and maybe that bond is excessive. Maybe it should be lowered. Those are all fair conversations. But the alternative that this law now gives the judge is just to detain them until their trial without ever having the chance to get out. Where's the equity in that?
Okay, I'm going to try to get through 2 more questions on crime. You have said that during this campaign you want to be tough on crime. What would you do when it comes to organized retail theft and gun crimes?
Well, to be tough on crime means that there has to be an understanding in our state that if you break the laws that you're going to be prosecuted. Now, obviously, that has to be coupled with the legislature and other administrative agencies doing their job to figure out why the crimes continue to be committed. That's a separate conversation. But to be tough on crime, again, Kim Foxx herself raised the retail theft limitation to $1,000 arbitrarily in Cook County when she didn't have the authority to do that. That's one of many things that's causing crime to increase more when it comes to the theft in the stores, et cetera.
What about public corruption in the state? How would you take that on?
Well, public corruption, we've had 9 state-level officials indicted by the federal government since Governor Pritzker took office, 0 for the Attorney General. The people of our state are starting to lose confidence in their government because they continue to see this corruption unfolding at the federal level with the federal prosecutors. If I'm the Attorney General, we will participate materially in that, and if we will investigate and prosecute them ourselves here in the state of Illinois without relying upon the federal government.
As we said in the beginning, you became known statewide during the pandemic when you sued the state over COVID mandates. Is that why you decided to run?
Not necessarily, no. In the COVID mandates, people need to understand that it was never about masks. It was never about vaccines. It was about the executive officer of our state wielding unprecedented power over people that's intended for the legislature. That's what's important about that. And that's what I would try to limit and control and be a check on that executive power.
What about, I mean, I have time for one more quick question. What about election integrity? What do you think the role of the AG is in that?
Well, the election integrity for the AG is to investigate and prosecute anyone who would violate our election laws. That starts with having people materially participating in the process. Mr. Raul and I actually agree on that we shouldn't just have these dangerous, generalized conversations about election integrity unless they are grounded and have foundation in specific facts of when people are engaging in impropriety. And to the extent that happens, it needs to be investigated and prosecuted. And again, that starts with people participating and being there on the ground watching what's going on.
All right, and that is our time here this morning. Tom DeVore, Republican candidate for Illinois Attorney General. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome back to our Chicago. Joining me now is the incumbent Illinois Attorney General, Democrat Kwame Raul. He's held that office since January 2019. Before that, he served as an Illinois state senator for 14 years. His legal career began in the Cook County State Attorney's Office. Attorney General Kwame Raul joining me now. Good morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
We're going to start with the same question as your opponent. This election for Attorney General is coming, as you know, a critical legal time across the country. So many major issues now facing states. Your top priorities if you're reelected?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for me to continue my work on violent crime. There's been a proliferation of guns that come into the Chicago area and throughout our state. And I've done multiple things to fight that flow of guns, including creating a crime gun tracing platform, suing to get a rogue gun manufacturer license revoked, prosecuting gun runners, and working with victims of crime, training law enforcement on firearm restraining orders, and working with the Secret Service's National Threat Assessment Center to try to prevent mass shootings and other targeted violence.
Attorney General, I have to ask you about the Safety Act. As you know, there are a lot of questions surrounding that. Critics say it was political ambush. Several states' attorneys are now coming out against it, suing the state. Where do you stand on the Safety Act as a whole? Will it mean more dangerous people could be released, as the critics say, putting the public at risk?
No, I think that's fear-mongering. I think, like any legislation, I've served 14 years in the legislature. We return every year and we amend legislation. And so there's definitely things to be cleared up in the Safety Act. I personally presided over 25 meetings with states' attorneys represented, with chiefs of police represented and sheriffs represented with regards to a provision within the Safety Act that deals with police certification and police training. And I actually received the reward from the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police for Public Servant of the Year for my work on the Safety Act. So the Safety Act is more than about one provision. With regards to cash bail, I do believe philosophically that cash should be the determinative of whether or not somebody is held pre-trial. It should be their risk to harming the public or their flight risk. And so we need to focus on that and make sure that there's clarifying amendments. And I think the legislature is working on that. And this fear-mongering is not helping.
But let me follow up on that, because those who oppose it say the threshold to prove a flight risk for judges to hold someone in custody, say for domestic violence or kidnapping, is just too difficult to prove. That bar is too high. So in reality, the judges can make that decision.
Well, I think, again, the legislature is having conversation with states' attorneys, with other law enforcement. And I think there's a veto session that occurs before January 1st, where the Safety Act's provisions with regards to pretrial detention would take effect. The Safety Act has already been amended in other portions of it. And so this fear-mongering, I've heard people say, well, the Safety Act has caused all this crime when provisions of it haven't even taken effect. That's clear evidence of fear-mongering and misinformation.
Let me move on to organized retail theft. I know you've spent a lot of time working on that. You've heard people say that part of the problem is lack of consequences in prosecution. Is that the case here for the rise in these crimes? What's behind it? What can be done?
Well, organized retail crime, we focus on the low-level offender a little bit too much, but there's the organized crime. These are not just organic events of smash and grab. These are people who are being hired to commit these acts. They're able to monetize the proceeds of this criminal enterprise by reselling it on online marketplaces. And so we have taken a comprehensive approach at tackling this problem. I co-chair a national task force on organized retail crime, as well as a task force within our state. And we've been educating law enforcement partners throughout the state. We've had several successful busts. We've had some stings going on at different shopping malls, and it's been a great partnership.
Public corruption, an issue, as you know, throughout every level of government in Illinois. What have you done to help reduce public corruption across the state?
First off, I hired personnel with expertise at fighting public corruption. My chief of staff is a former federal prosecutor who's prosecuted public corruption cases. My chief of investigations is a former FBI agent who has years of experience investigating public corruption cases. I hired a career prosecutor from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office to be my head of public integrity, and we've prosecuted cases throughout the state of public officials committing misconduct.
All right, I'm going to have to leave it right there, trying to keep it to equal time for both of you. Attorney General Kwame Raoul running for a second term. Thank you so much for joining us today and answering some questions.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, if you like that video, be sure to